You can hear you, Timothy.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the NHS.UK beta show and tell. I'm Naima Chowdhury. I look after the development side, and I have the pleasure of being your Master of Ceremonies today. So I'll be telling you a little bit about what we're about, but also then sharing questions at the end too. Just a reminder for those, or hello to our external guests today. Just a reminder to you, you may already have been told, this is a snapshot of what we've done in our last sprint, so it's not a whole summary of what our project has been so far. You'll see the activities of what we've been doing in the last week. If you want to know more about what we have been doing, do feel free to catch us at the end. So we often spend a little bit of time at the end of this thing just hanging about and just chatting to people about what we've been up to. So if you want to know a bit more context, that's the time to grab us. So in terms of today, we've got quite a busy agenda. Yes. I will be keeping timings, so you will see those who are speaking cards that'll be flashed at you, 2 minutes, 1 minute, you're off kind of thing. Also should welcome, we have a couple of external speakers today. So we have Connectus joining us. Connectus is a communication and collaboration platform for carers. And so we've got Mark and David who are going to be speaking to us about that towards the end of our show and tell. So I won't speak for much further, but I will start handing over to Henrik to talk about one-off procedures.
Hi there, I'm Henrik. I'm a content designer on the team. So I'm going to talk a bit about what we're looking at for the next 6 months between May and September. So basically moving on from the alpha. And we've decided on 4 areas we want to look at. One of procedures, compliance, social care and prevention. These came out of doing some research, and they are things that we haven't looked at in the alpha, things that we think we can learn a lot from, and things that are high traffic on NHS choices at the moment. So we're not trying to solve these areas, we're just trying to learn, and we're looking to find more design and content patterns, and we want to lay the groundwork, so to speak, for transitioning from choices to NHS.UK, if that makes sense. So basically we want to build a design and content tool set that we can then just pick from and apply to other conditions so that we can gain speed quite quickly. There's one missing here. The 2 conditions, so we're starting with one of procedures because it gives us the opportunity to look at the whole journey from symptoms all the way to managing a condition over recovery and having the procedure. And the 2 we're looking at are hernia and osteoarthritis. Osteoarthritis is a very painful joint condition that often ends in hip replacement if it's down here. So we've done some desk research to understand what we're dealing with, and we usually start with a board. So the team basically goes off and looks at lots of sources, from NICE to choices to WebMD to any sort of obscure osteoarthritis or hernia clinics that are out there, and we plot everything along our user experience map that we came up with during the alpha, that goes from prevention over symptoms to diagnosis to treatment, recovery after surgery if you have it, to managing the condition. And basically, in a nutshell, what we have now are loads of facts, clinical facts about the conditions, but what we need to do is to find the patient story behind these facts. So the next thing will be that we do research. We will talk to people, patients and healthcare professionals to see what is going on. So what we have here is a lot of facts about osteoarthritis, and what we've done is we have also looked at what's missing at the moment. So we've got these cards that are called black holes. So I've got all these symptoms. For example, when is actually the point when people go and see a doctor? Is it about pain? Is it about not being able to live your life normally anymore? Then there's a whole lot of information about diagnosis out there, but there's then this big black hole. What happens between my diagnosis and entering hospital for a hip replacement, for example? Nothing out there, nothing that we could find anyway. Then this whole thing about treatment. So if I have a hip replacement, there's very little readily available about what forms do I have to fill in, who's going to talk to me about this procedure, what happens when I wake up. There is information on some hospital websites, so Guy and St Thomas have some. It's hard to find though, and nothing is sort of connected up with the information about the condition. So the purpose of this is to learn what's out there and to learn about what's not out there. So the next steps with this is we have to do a bit more desk research to understand the procedures better. We have to make contacts with clinicians in hospitals so that we can go and talk to patients and doctors and nurses, and we have to speak to users. So at the end of this, we want to have a set of user needs that correspond to each of these stages. So a set of needs about symptoms, a set of needs about what happens to people when they go into hospital and what they want, what's missing at the moment. So we will speak to people who had a hernia operation, a hip replacement, etc., basically to make this human and real. And that's it. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I know most of everyone here, but if you don't know me, I'm Tim, I'm one of the designers on NHS Alpha. This week or last week and into this week as well, we'll be looking at what patterns are. How do I,
just press.
is that, okay, sorry, there's nothing on the screen, that's the. So, design patterns for us. So what we're going to talk about is what we mean when we talk about patterns. And for us, when we start doing like system design work, we realise that patterns are basically repeatable solutions to user needs. So sometimes we see a lot of user needs which are quite similar, and we'll come up with design solutions to fix those needs. And those solutions themselves, because the user needs seem to be occurring a lot, we want to try and invoke the same design solution, or some type of the same design solution, so we get efficiencies of scale. So we're not having to redesign and reinvent every single time we actually have a design exercise. One of the advantages of doing that is that if we start embedding design thinking into the system itself, this is thinking that other people then can build off when they're building their services. We're not going to be the only team on NHS Alpha, it'll be expanded out, so we need to make sure we communicate that effectively across a very ever-increasing size team. They're helpers and building blocks to solve your own user needs as well. So even though we may do a specific amount of work around, for example, the stuff on osteoarthritis or hernia, there may be other symptoms and conditions which other teams may be working on, which they can use that design thinking in their work. And for us, the other thing as well is it presents as a live user bot. It presents a consistent but not uniform digital NHS. We want the experience to be matched up throughout the whole of the digital .nhs experience as much as possible. And having that thinking here allows us to then, with a separate team, to be able to make sure that the experience is consistent across all the different touch points that a customer or a patient comes across. So patterns are usually defined in a lot of ways as the way the thing looks. If you see something which appears on something on a similar page, you'll expect it to appear on another page. And that's in a way how they're generally defined. Things like date pickers and interface elements like that are things that people are used to experiencing, and they understand them because they repeatedly use them over travel sites, over booking other types of booking sites as well. But for us, we need to expand that definition out wider. So as well as the things like the interface, there are patterns around how we structure our content, how we write about the content, and there's also patterns that influence how we actually build and implement the interface as well on an actual code level as well. So I'm just going to go through how patterns are made for us. We've come up with a structure, a taxonomy of at this stage, 3 different levels. The very first level is the unit, and this is the most basic building point, a basic block, things like a page header or a paragraph piece of text. Now, we don't necessarily explicitly talk about those user needs, but there is a user need, which is I want to be able to understand what I'm reading. And so there's thinking which goes into just the simple design of typography and stuff like that, which satisfies that specific user need. We then combine these basic units together into things like components. So here's a header component, here's a header unit and a paragraph unit, and we're currently using this together as which we call out module together. We have another one called 99 header combined with a paragraph and another paragraph, which then turns into a call 99 module, which we're using on the page. I'll let this animation run a few times. The thing which where this relates to some of the content design is that we know specifically that users respond really well to when they have segmented content which is presented to them, when they actually understand what actions these are taking. That is a content pattern working really well with some of the display patterns, which then helps us come up with design solutions specifically around the user needs of signposting users to users what they need to do with certain areas of content. Assembly is then the next stage up, where we start merging components and units together to form entire base. This animation is running at the end because it just runs continually, so we'll go to the start. So we may have a single screen, or a single piece of interface, or a single experience, which will go now, completely blank. So it could be a mobile, it could be a web, it could be anything as well. We may have some furniture, then we may have a header component, we may have a content component in there, and we can see how our modules then fit together. Now, this in itself is a pattern itself because it is a solution that we found that with some of the stuff that we're working on with headaches and as well as and with rashes for children, is that when users come to this, there's an explicit need about saying, what do I do next when I've got this particular, when I'm reading about headaches, how do I know I should call 999, or maybe it's not so serious, or maybe I should just go to the GP. And so this particular assembly helps solve that a lot better. And so by making this into an actual explicit pattern, which we can then communicate to the team, what's happening is that when someone else comes with a similar problem, the problem being, how do I signpost content to patients so they know what actions to take from it? This is a great place for them to start. It won't be exactly the same. We're not expecting it to copy that verbatim, but we're wanting them to understand the design thinking behind it so that they can apply that to their own specific problems. So, as I said just then, assemblies are great examples for others to help solve their own user needs. Now, patterns also exist within an environment. We're just talking about those specific modules, but things like the colour palette, the grid structure, the things actually the framework that things are presented on, the NHS brand, the typeface that we use, tone of voice, iconography, reading age, all those things become the environment that the patterns then live within. And this is really what we're talking about when we talk about the NHS ecosystem in this way. Creating a shared understanding of patterns is probably one of the key drivers that we need to, or key things we need to achieve, really, especially across a larger and expanding team. So presenting them in some way, for example, a component like this, where we talk about how we use it, we talk about specifically it meets these user needs, and then we talk about the research that backs that up. This is a really strong argument to have that makes the design decisions less arbitrary and much more rooted in good thinking around user needs and the research that backs it up. Why are we doing this? Sorry, I've got it, my notes are on here. That's what I was looking for, on here. Let me just put up my notes on this. Okay, so a few things we want to talk about. I've touched on these earlier, so I'll go quickly through the recap. It makes the design thinking scalable. We talked about the size of the team increasing. We talked about numbers of people needing to access this particular work. So using a codified language like this means that the thinking is actually scalable. We can distribute it to a large number of team members, and people can build off that specific thinking as well. It's collaborative because I spoke not specifically just from a presentation angle. I spoke about how content design and interface design work together, how we work with developers as well too in terms of it. So it's a much greater collaborative design process rather than focused specifically on a couple of key team members as well. They're also repeatable and reusable. I mentioned this before as well too. They're scalable in that way. So we're not expecting to do bespoke design work for every single problem we're coming up. We're looking at a system approach rather than a specific page approach as well. And I mentioned this before, and we'll go through it again as well. Patterns provide a way of providing a consistent but not uniform NHS.UK. Thank you. I've got it, sorry. Thanks.
Martin next.
So we're going to switch over to our working from home member.
Hello? Hi. Can you hear us as well, Martin?
I can. It's wonderful.
There you go. Are you sharing your screen so we can see the slides?
I'm about to.
Perfect. There you go. You're up.
Here we go.
Put 2 minutes there. Cool.
Good morning, everyone. This is a little bit disembodied, but let's give it a go. So we had a hack day around symptoms, and it was really a way of communicating lots of the things that we learned about symptoms in the previous 3 months. Lots of research with Kim and Henrik and Matt and our team members, and we wanted to find a way that was sort of interactive to distill lots of the things that we learned and sit as a challenge for people in lots of organisations. I think more than 20 people came from across the estate, and a way to engage people and challenge people to say, well, if this is what we think is true of how patients experience symptoms, what should we do about it? Not necessarily directly within existing programs, but moving forward. So, what is the hack day? I think lots of you have been to hack day type things, but it's a way of learning by making and doing, and we start with the needs that we've got from our research. What is it that people need in relation to symptoms? Splitting into teams. There were 4 teams. Teams, first of all, elaborated some scenarios, made many sketches that were possible solutions, explored the solution space, and then narrowed down on a single idea and built a paper prototype in a day to say, well, if this is our idea, how would that actually play out in practice? Ran a little mini user test by grabbing a team member from another team who hasn't seen it before, and see, well, if they play the role of patient, what will they make of this solution? And then the teams at the end would pitch their ideas back to the whole room, securing funding and being chosen as a possible solution. So obviously we're not going to build the things that we sketched, but along the way we learned a whole lot of things, and the souvenirs that we bring back from this day, this interdisciplinary day, that's actually the output, I would say, of the hack day. So there were 4 challenges. They were sort of creative up front, and teams chose them at random, so they didn't know what they were going to get. So teams attacked the challenges of knee pain, ataxia, headache, and cough. So these are the hoppers, and they created a scenario for Debbie, who had injured her knee at the gym, and she's a busy mother with small children, and so they produced a solution that was all around the challenges of booking, of knowing where you need to go next, of seeing that your X-ray has been interpreted, that you now have to go and see a consultant, choosing that consultant, of having access to your own imaging. So they built a solution that was all around those kinds of things. Team Ataxia worried about Phil and his wobbly hands, which in fact was an underlying neurological condition. Teams had to decide whether or not patients had a strong or weak inkling of what might be wrong, and whether or not that person was in fact correct in their hunches about what their problem might be or what they should do. So each of these people are in different situations, different scenarios. Phil's scenario was that a family visit would be what would push him over the edge to investigate his symptoms. Team Ataxia used the technology in phones, cameras, and microphones, of facial recognition and speech recognition to, if not do diagnosis, do looking for underlying problems in facial symmetry and speech patterns. And they also had a solution that was around if this is a real problem, a hint of a real problem, we will automatically triage you and book you into somewhere you need to see. The presumption will be that you will turn up. The Headbangers team were dealing with a headache at 4 in the morning, and their solution was all about using SMS, all about using the most universal text chat medium we have. That might be with a robot, or might be with a human, or might be with a human-enhanced robot, or vice versa, possibly with a lightweight check of identity, and then the ability to use some data in your record to improve the analysis of the questioning and answers, so that if the NHS knows who you are, we can do something a bit smarter. And it finished with home delivery of painkillers. So it closed the whole loop rather than just saying sort of text box, now you need to go and get some painkillers. So it completed the circuit. So everybody built things in paper, rapid sketches, and they ran little usability tests with people taken from other team members, and quickly iterated their solutions, made some changes, things that worked and didn't work, and then made their pitch. Last team, Hacking Cough. They had someone who was essentially avoiding going to see a GP, worried that they had something, their cough was in fact something very serious, sticking their head in the sand a bit. And they looked at a solution that started with general information pages that led through some interactive pages where there might be some questions and some further suggestions and some questions in classic style of a symptom checker. And if that didn't work, moving you onto a chat with a text chat with a human, with a clinician, ultimately leading to the reassurance that in fact this wasn't anything very serious, but was simply a complication from gastric reflux, and they needed some Gaviscon. It also had a follow-up mechanism to follow a symptom over time, because of some risk factors, if in fact the cough hasn't gone away in another 4 weeks. So we had lots of fun, and lots of people got to suggest things that were slightly mad, but we brought some souvenirs back from this sketching session that hopefully we can use. And it was feedback on the day that we solicited, which I think raises some questions about how we run these kinds of events in the future. I think people did enjoy themselves, and lots of people got very involved, very engaged. People wanted to win. But some of the feedback was, I don't quite know why we're doing this. People are clearly used to more traditional ways of making decisions with agendas and bullet points, and we need to do a better job of explaining why we do this kind of team-based learning by making and doing sessions. And because it was novel, people were challenged in terms of what should I be doing, and just the concept that they have to draw the solution rather than sort of list the requirements of the solution. So people needed lots of practical help and examples, I think, to know what they should be doing. But on the whole, although there were these two sides to the feedback, I think the speed at which we did things and using this way of working is a thing we should do more of, but do a better job of explaining. So what do we get out of the whole day? These are the themes which I think are, if you ignore the details of any particular solution, which obviously things sketched in 2 hours, we're not going to say, yeah, great, let's do that. But what are the underlying patterns? They are that when we're dealing with symptoms, we need something that has a conversation that is two-way, that has a bit of backwards and forwards. Lots of people, lots of teams were creating things that had questions and answers, that had things that led onwards through conversations with either robots or people, escalating upwards from simply consuming information to doing something interactive to then engaging with the system. There's also the theme of the tricorder, and as we approach market saturation of 90% smartphones in everybody's hands, was it by 2025, 90%? What can we do with cameras and microphones in everybody's hands? That's an interesting thing that is clearly becoming possible in the land of Siri and friends. There was the theme that you're not just looking at flat pages, but some data should be exchanged. You're offering up something of yourself into the system, and it should acknowledge that, record that. It should start to know who you are, and also the idea that systems would both learn and follow up, that they could come back to you in 4 weeks, that they could check that the right thing had happened, and that once you started a conversation, having the loop closed in some way, that feels important. And last of all, there was the very good. Last of all, 10 minutes for sure. Last of all, there was the idea that we triage people towards the services they need and then actually book it. And that surely if it's a digital system, it could do all of that. If you want more, there's lots of it at the URL. If you're at package, you've got an email, and come and talk to me if you want to know more. Thanks.
Cheers, Martin.
Next we have Mark David.
Yeah.
I think we've got the your slide deck.
Hey, perfect. Thank you very much.
This one.
We're waving, you can only see us through that.
There you go.
Cool, thank you very much. So, hello everyone, I'm Mark, I'm the founder of Connectis. We're not here to talk about the NHS, we're here to talk about social care. And I'm the founder of a company that's trying to enable high quality person-centered care for older people living in their own homes. So our story really starts with my granddad and my family's experiences caring for him. So as he became older, Granddad suffered from a range of chronic conditions, including dementia. And it was really important to him that he stayed in his own home. But like many older people, he lived alone. And over time, he required quite an extensive network of carers to support him. So he had local family, which was my family in Kent. There was sort of distant family that could live hundreds of miles away, or I had some cousins that went travelling, were on a completely different continent but wanted to stay in touch. As my granddad's conditions sort of deteriorated, we had a network of formal carers that would go and see him initially for companionship, but over time sort of really helping him remain independent and in his own home 3 or 4 times a day. There was also a really big band of informal carers, like the Meals on Wheels man, or a next door neighbour, or someone from a dementia outreach group, and that's before you even get to healthcare professionals and other support, which was a huge list in itself. And ideally, all of these people would be able to collaborate in real time to deliver the best care on that particular day for my granddad, but that just wasn't possible because the entire social care sector works on paper. And this is a real care plan. Care plans sit within the home in an A4 folder. They're typically 30 to 40 pages long. And basically the paperwork in the sector causes real barriers for every single person that comes into contact with it. So we've spent lots of time speaking to users, and firstly for older people, so the most important sort of user. This is a quote that Holly will speak in a second if I don't run out of time, we'll sort of go through. So they change the time, they don't let me know, I'm left waiting, not knowing what's going on. For older people, they feel they've got no information about who's coming, when they're coming, what their day looks like, what their week looks like. For the formal carers, the barriers are equally significant. I'm going blind, not knowing what I'm going to see. I don't know what the assessment is, if there's been any change. So lots of formal carers do that job, so they like caring for people. And it's really important for them to have information, but timely information. And particularly if you're dealing with older people with complex conditions like dementia, really understanding what sort of day that person's having before you before you open the door is hugely important. For the family networks, they haven't updated the care plans. We have to tell the carers how to apply mum's cream. With older people with complex medical conditions, their well-being can change by or during the day, let alone sort of like week to week or month to month. So we experience this as a family, trying to coordinate all of these different groups, none of which are able to speak to each other. So it's really tough, stressful for the family, and really importantly stressful for the old person as well. And for the home care providers, running a care-based system on paper works, just a crazy system. We've never designed it that way. It's completely inefficient, and they've got no management tools, really. And it's also hugely expensive because all of this paperwork has to be prepared, maintained, stored for 7 years in boxes. So the entire system's really broken, everyone knows it, and it needs radical change, and we decided to focus on it. So Connectis is a 3G internet-enabled tablet that stays in the older person's home and becomes the central enabling hub for all of the different types of carers that come into contact with an older person, but including the older person themselves. We've got a prototype with us which has got a new interface. This one sort of is very much sort of the old PDF version. But for an older person, they're able to see what their day looks like, what their week looks like, and we've developed the interfaces for people with vision impairments. So it's actually focusing on like how they need to see the information rather than how I need to see it. For the carers, they're able to get far better data about what an older person's well-being is like before they arrive. They're able to quickly and easily record their notes, and that's not so we can reduce people's jobs to box ticking. It's so that they can spend far more high-quality time with an older person to make sure that they're providing tailored care for that particular day. For the family members, they're able to get real-time information that they just don't have, so they can deliver the best quality care for their older loved one, and be able to sort of manage all of these different sort of care networks. And the home care providers, who initially are our ultimate customer, are able to provide far better quality care and also over time reduce their administrative costs. So we've designed our platform with significant user input. We've developed it in partnership with the regional branch of NHS.UK in Kent. And we've actually, Holly, it's probably best for you to just go through these 3 slides if I've got 2 minutes.
Basically it's just, I'm a service designer, so I retrained from being a graphic designer at the RCA and joined Mark sort of about 6 months in, and kind of introduce him, I think, a little bit to the design process that I was used to. And, you know, hats off to Mark, because he basically was happy to go back to square one and sort of start again with the research. So yeah, classic 4D double diamond design process, but basically went back to the carers, the team leaders, the management, as well as the families, the other people themselves, and just talk to people and find out really, you know, what's the issue with the current system, and then actually, you know, doing kind of journey mapping, sort of define what the particular challenges were, and we started to come up with ideas with them, and then sort of co-design, like we went away, used some of our skills to kind of sketch some of the ideas, but then helped to kind of co-design actually what potentially, if there was a how it would look like. So this was a session we did with the team leaders, and actually that's basically so useful because really, like at the end of the day with adoption, because then they obviously have designed it and they feel like that is something that they want to use, they understand it a lot more rather than us kind of going and saying, here, this is for you to use. And then we've obviously been doing that with the carers and kind of a bit like the hack day actually, in a way, kind of get them to sort of present back, and it really increases their confidence as well. And now we're kind of, I think we're on sort of version 3 or something, so, you know, Mark had an initial prototype, we had kind of version 2, we're now on 3, and continue sort of testing and changing, and Dave here is our kind of technical officer. So I'm, you know, graphic designer by training, but now we're kind of actually starting to build it in the back end and use it.
Yeah, so we've had some super users using it for about 6 months. We released sort of a live version a couple of weeks ago that's being used in parallel with pen and paper. And our vision is that we can start sort of joining up all of these different carer groups, they can collaborate. And over time, because it's a piece of hardware that stays in someone's home, adding services which are assigned to grow around other people to assist them. And also there's a lot of IoT, which can be hugely powerful, but a lot more powerful if you can combine it with the qualitative observations and the trends of older people. So we've got a really, really strong team around this. We've got a lot of sort of quite high profile supports. We went through the Bethnal Green Ventures Social Impact Accelerator. We've won a bunch of awards around sort of IoT in healthcare, and last week we were announced as one of 8 startups that's getting support from Nominate Trust. So you know, we want to build a big open platform, really keen to collaborate with anyone that would like to hear more about what we're doing, or very keen to sort of start speaking to healthcare professionals as well and see how this could sort of link into the NHS over time. That's one of the ultimate visions, but not necessarily the near-term one. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much to everyone who spoke today. Now is the time to not hold back and fire your questions at any of the speakers that we had. Dan.
Can I ask us, what are the challenges or the barriers that you face?
So I think one of the main barriers that we identified, which was really important Holly coming into the process, was that no one, there's almost 1 million formal carers in the UK. There's many millions more that care informally. And particularly formal carers, people really never really engage them. They just sort of assume they're kind of people that could go and work at supermarkets, but do that for lack of other options. So sort of, I think one of the big barriers is adoption, and that's why it's been hugely important actually sitting down, throwing all of our preconceptions out of the window, and really trying to understand people's jobs, and more broadly their lives, and sort of what pressures they experience day to day. So the big barrier for us, I think, is adoption, particularly of formal carers.
And sort of likewise as well with the technology side of things, is obviously going from a carer, writing down their notes, pen and paper, and then using sort of a tablet or something, and initially kind of technology was something that was very scary for them, at least when we sat down with them, they were like, oh no, I haven't got a tablet, I don't use email, I wouldn't know what to do with that. But we sort of, almost by stealth in a way, basically one of them then sort of picked up their smartphone from their bag and started texting on WhatsApp, so we were like, oh, so you use that, and even the ones that don't necessarily have a smartphone are using text messaging, so like that kind of initial project, it's kind of well-known skill in a way how to text, so we basically kind of ended up building the platform around that basic kind of, again, kind of question and answer, just being able to communicate via text, but built into the platform, and that just really helped them see something that's familiar.
So if you look at it, it will look like WhatsApp for carers, because it sort of like has the flows of how they do their job, but delivered in a format that they use every single day outside of their jobs.
I'm quite interested in what kind of response you've got from local government or local NHS or national NHS in trying to pitch any of this. I saw you've got a lot of support in terms of your startup and charity. Like, what's the interaction been like with the public sector?
So we're at a relatively early stage, but the response has been actually sort of in some places really enthusiastic. So we're a really small team, so we haven't like gone out and spoken to everyone, so we just don't have the capacity. But we won an event called NHS.UK Boost in Leeds, which brought us the support of the Digital Health Enterprise Zone that works around Leeds and Bradford. And for example, Bradford City Council have been like really enthusiastic about what we're doing, because there's a big focus on ageing around Bradford and Leeds. So they've been, within the next sort of month to 6 weeks, should be sort of knowing whether we're going to be moving ahead with like wide-scale trials up there, and they look after or provide support to 5,000 people. So where we've been able to engage, and it's a small group, we don't have unlimited capacity for it, but where we have been able to engage, the response has been really enthusiastic. So I think people recognise that things need to change, but it's just about them being aware of what we're doing, I think, as much as anything else.
Yeah,
What's been the biggest impact for carers? Because I got the impression filling out paper forms is not them doing their job, it's the bit they have to do around their job. So by improving that, what has then impacted upon their actual job? More time, or what is that?
Yeah, in its early days with the carers, I mean, we're probably still in beta stage, really, just think about it in those terms. But the goal is that they're able to have more time delivering better quality care because they've got the information. That's the goal. But what we've noticed in the near term is that engaging sort of a few carers within NHS.UK or some other organisations, once they've got over the fact that we're not consultants and we weren't asking them these questions to report back to their boss, the people who've been involved in the design process have started getting sort of incoming from other carers being like, hey, look, what's this thing that you're developing? And sort of, why haven't I seen it? And when am I going to see it? So I think the goal is they can spend more high quality time with older people delivering better care. The near-term thing, I think, is just the recognition from carers that people are actually listening to them and taking the time to understand how they do their jobs, which in itself I think is really powerful.
And the next sort of thing we really want to bring forward is that sort of going in blind bit. So now that we've got a few carers to start recording stuff about a particular older person, we can actually filter the most important bit of that, the most urgent or the most qualitative even, and actually just even send a text to the next carer 10 minutes before they're going in. So just start to basically prototype that idea of actually giving them some information before they go in, and actually, because I found when talking to them that was actually a really kind of anxious time for them, basically not knowing what's behind the door. So that's kind of the next stage for us, I think.
Just if I have one small detail as well from the actual older person's perspective, something at the moment that you may have seen was a mock-up of the appointment. We've got that in a live version now, but it's just the day and the time of what the appointment is. We're going to be putting the carer's face on there as well, so the older person will actually know, okay, this is actually a new carer. Previously I didn't even know a new carer was going to come. Now I know the new carer is Steve, and now I know what Steve looks like. So it's kind of iteratively.
Did that come out of research in terms of having the faces? We did something similar when we were doing our GP work, being able to put the faces to people who we were going to see made a powerful difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just that sort of thing that they're sort of sat in their home, they don't know who's coming, when they're coming, and obviously, kind of long term as well. You might start thinking about do people kind of basically have preferences, because we've spoken to some people who really don't get on with some of their carers, and actually, you know, when they do walk through the door, you know, I've got to do that, which is obviously, you know, just human nature. So it's like, how do you then start to bring kind of back to the system?
So is this initially about making communication better between these groups, or is it also about, I don't know, I've got an appointment for my pedicure today and I want to change it, pulling that kind of stuff in as well?
So initially it's about collaboration within like a really small bit, which is the sort of social care sector. But one of the reasons we've got sort of the information on the screen for an older person to see is that the carer can see it as well. So on the mock-up we've got over here, sort of when a carer arrives, they know that Fred has a hospital appointment today, and that's so. You know, they might not have a really detailed conversation about it, but at least they're able to know what the context of that person's life is and start having, you know, slightly different conversations than, you know, it's raining outside or what's on television. It's like, okay, how are you feeling about your hospital appointment? And if they're feeling particularly anxious, knowing that they have a hospital appointment, having a means of communicating that to the people that need to know in the right format at the right time. So at the moment, we're focused on a really narrow bit, but the goal is to expand it to, you know, broad health services over time.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, are you having to worry a lot about permissions, about who's allowed to see what information? Because potentially you've got a massive amount of personal data there.
The information that we're recording at the moment is relatively sort of low level information. But I think an interesting thing for us spending lots of time with older people and lots of time with families is that, you know, security is an issue that gets raised. But if you're dealing with an older person where, you know, there's far more upside to, you know, people having information, being able to deliver the highest quality care at the right point, than there is downside from people using quite low level information. So I think people recognise that, you know, that there is a balance between having information on paper and locked in an iron box, and then sort of, well, what protocols do you have in place to make sure that it can be used more broadly, providing it's not sensitive information. So the thing that we found is that a lot of older people are kind of like classic early adopters, because they're kind of, if they're at home all day in the same routine, they're willing to be involved in kind of anything that sort of is different and brings them into contact with different people, which to me has been a real eye-opener.
Yeah, just about Utrecht Leeds Council, was it? Or Bradford Council. What's their angle in terms of, do I see it as this is going to reduce paperwork? I mean, obviously there's this delivering better quality care, but are they looking at the bottom line and seeing the impact this is going to have?
Yeah, I mean, it's twofold. So we've been really fortunate to be speaking to multiple bits of Bradford. So we've been speaking to people that are trying to engage the broader community around sort of old people's care. But yeah, we're speaking to the people that are responsible for safeguarding sort of the carers. So that's, you know, and the older people. So, you know, the sell to that person is, hey, look, this is a really good safeguarding tool, and they get that it can provide high quality care, but within their job box, that's not the sort of driver. But yeah, so within all these individuals, you know, the safeguarding person's interested, the person that's paying for the private companies to provide care, saying, hey, look, this is a really good tool for knowing when people have arrived and when they've left. But there is a broader recognition that, yes, those bits are important, it's not the goal. The goal is that they can be used to deliver higher quality care.
Thank you very much, everyone. That's a wrap. We'll be hanging around for a little while longer. Our next show and tell is in 2 weeks' time, and we'll have moved offices by then, so we'll be at Skipton House at Elephant Castle. So yeah, if you want to join us, chat to Emily and Benji. Yeah, hopefully we'll see you all again soon.
Yes, awesome. As you say, you were doing some cycle record, analytics on choices at some point?
It was the, well, I think it was NHS information center website that has like a list of organizations, so we kind of ran through
So a lot of big links.
yes, yeah, that was kind of interesting. Well, we can, there's actually another program which we can use that also puts the data in areas come up.
Migration of the team to here. They've got the office to their area, which is the team.
I mean, what I love to do is about one of the because I remember someone said, oh, there's a websites that NHS and just
Yeah, we talked about you kind of
Well, what it is, the team, Sarah's one there, with my motion machine. Agile ways of working, which means we use presentation techniques, some agile workflow. I'll show you the other days. We ran this for last week actually. Things like that she'd heard of, which she'd seen. So,
right.
So it's quite curious. Closing this stuff down.